sculpture class. I'm really excited to talk about our first adventure, and we are going to talk about mold making. So mold making is one of the most important processes to learn about if you're interested in a three-dimensional field, because mold making is really the foundation for a lot of different things. So, molds can be used for casting multiple materials, and the method we're going to learn is we're going to be using rubber molds, which are great for any material that essentially turns from a liquid to a solid. So the material we are going to be using is Polygel 35, and that is a product made by Polytech, which is a company located down in Easton, Pennsylvania, that is one of the two major companies that's really well known for mold making materials. I tend to use them as well as a company called Smooth On. They both have really great products that work well for mold making. So in fact, the first mold we are going to take a look at is this filigree frame. So you can see there is the positive, which is on the right, that is made from cast wax, and then the negative on the left, which is the mold. So that mold material is a silicone mold material. And the way I built that was I built a box made out of cardboard, and just like previous projects, whenever you're doing any casting into a cardboard form, you want to use hot glue, and you want to make sure that you seal up your edges really well. So I use a combination of hot glue and tape to make a mold box. So in this case, I made a mold box that looked like a giant zero, and then I had the frame on the bottom of the box, and I had the mold material that I poured directly on top. When it was dry, I flipped it over, took the mold material out and the original, and I was left with this. So you can see with a mold, you could get really good detail. So let's get in really close and let's take a look. So, you can see all that filigree pattern, and because the mold material itself goes from liquid to solid, that really helps get these forms looking super accurate. I mean, if you look really close here, it gets super fine details. Similar to mold making materials like alginate, which is only like a one-shot mold making deal because the mold material itself deteriorates really quickly, but it works well for materials such as like organics, like fabrics, or if you want to cast anything like plants, you want to use something like an alginate, whereas this material works better for something that's kind of a little more solid. So the original piece was a brass frame, so this was a metal piece, and the key thing with this piece is I made sure it was really well released with a material that is a spray mold release. So here we have Smooth On Universal Mold Release, and every time you do a project or you do anything mold making that needs to be released, you always want to make sure that material is being used, and that way your form doesn't get stuck. Because if you don't do that, there is a good chance your form will get stuck in that mold material. So the type of mold that this piece actually is called an open-faced mold. And the reason why it's called an open-faced mold is because it's kind of like you're seeing what you're going to get. So you pour, whatever material in here. So in our case, we poured wax, and we got this as the result. So, as you can see, we'll do a close-up of the casting itself. Really fine detail. Really fine detail. So, you're really able to get some nice, accurate looking work. And, with these open face molds, there's just some really cool stuff, you can do. So this is the second one. This is a hand mirror mold. So again, you can get really fine detail. And if you wanted to pour material in here, you'd spray release and you'd cast it and get it in the sculptural form. Next is actually the type of mold we're going to be focusing on in this class. I apologize, this mold is a little bit messy because it was a mold I had to make really quickly because some students had a lot of excess mold material when we were doing this project for another class. So that's why it kind of looks a little bit rushed. But the original form right here is on the far right. It's the little white form that's actually 3D printed me. And then what we did was we made a box, and I put the form in a box, and then I put what's called keys around it. So that's why you see all these little dots kind of around the mold. And what that does is it helps interlock the mold. And I have another mold as an example so you can see it a little bit more clearly. But what would happen is if I wanted to cast it, I would go ahead and I would spray the inside, and then I'm going to put these two parts together. And then I would use 2 pieces of wood and a clamp or 2 just to make sure the mold tension's really tight, which is really key. And then I would go ahead and cast the piece. But essentially, the type of mold making we're doing is called a 2-part block mold. So, as you can see, it's a block, and it fits together kind of like a sandwich, right? And, we'll let that sit and cast, and then, when it's ready, we will unmold it and we will get a form just like this. So I can make a little army of 3D printed Katies if I really wanted to. Okay, so the next mold I'm going to show, this is a mold of this lady right here, and she is cast in resin. I purposely went through and I cut out sections of the dress, but normally, I would get just a solid version of her if I wanted to cast that as I would normally. But this, you can see same concept as that other mold where it's kind of like a sandwich. Here I made different kinds of keys where, if we get up close, they kind of interlock like this, and this would fit over on this side, okay? So it's important to key molds because you want to make sure that they really fit well together, kind of like a sandwich, and the key is you also want a lot of tension, so, that way you don't have any mold material leak out the sides. But, essentially with molds, you can cast a lot of different materials in this. Like this piece right here, she happens to be cast plastic. Before I was talking about making this piece in cast wax, and wax is primarily what we'll be working with this semester because we are doing a lot of cast metal work. So what's really nice about the castings and doing this mold making method is you can get some really great fine detailed wax pieces. You can, whenever you work in wax and you're going to cast it in metal, it's really important to make sure your wax is looking super pristine before we start the ceramic shell or the sand molding process, because that wax is going to show every single detail that will appear in your metal piece. So something really neat that we did recently was we did an iron pour last semester, and we had a couple pieces that were cast in, they were originally fabric pieces that I dunked in wax, and then we went ahead and cast them in iron. So I'm going to take you into the shell room so you can see our nice shell room here. So down here, let me get this one out in the open. The other one I'm still working on, but this is a cast iron oven mitt. So if we get in real close, let's see if the camera will focus a little better. There we go. You can see that picked up all the stitches from the oven mitt, which is pretty neat. I'm going to talk and walk as we go here because we're going to take another look at another really cool piece where we did kind of more of a what's called a direct burnout. And what the direct burnout is when we dip something in wax and we keep the majority of the material on the piece. So in this case, we decided to make some cast iron donuts. This is Nikki Taylor's piece. And what we did was, in order to make these, we actually took an alginate mold, and then we had the donuts in there, and we cast wax into the alginate, and then we went ahead and did a sand mold process and cast the donuts. So you can see the detail came out really good. So again, making sure your wax is really, really well done, that means your metal, it's going to really come out in those details. So, that's pretty neat that we were able to get that. But anytime that, you want to do something where it's like an organic material, we definitely want to figure out the best way to do that, whether that be taking an alginate mold, or in, my case, how I made the glove was I dipped it in wax and I directly burnt it out. And the reason, you have to kind of pick and choose what works best for the direct burnout. Like with my piece, it was more like cotton fabrics, so that works okay with coming out of the kiln. But like if you're looking for something like a synthetic, that's not going to work so well in the kiln. So you want to make sure the whatever you're burning out is as clean as possible, so we can get some really cool detailed things. But what's nice about casting is pretty much the sky's the limit. If you want to make a certain thing, for the most part, you can make just about anything in casting. So I look forward to seeing what everyone comes up with as far as sculpture pieces are concerned. And I look forward to working with you all this semester. All right, take care. See you soon.